Okay, so today we'll be discussing about Bordetella pertussis, which is basically a gram-negative Coccobacillus causing the disease known as whooping cough commonly. So, Bordetella pertussis is a gram-negative, strictly aerobic Coccobacillus which causes whooping cough. Now, before beginning, we must learn about the virulence factor of the organism so that we can understand what is the basic toxin or virulence factor which is causing certain manifestations within the body. So, firstly, we come to adhesins, which will help the bacteria to adhere to the respiratory mucosa. So, adhesins include filamentous hemagglutinin, pertactin, and fimbriae or pili. Filamentous hemagglutinin, as the name suggests, it basically can adhere to the red blood cells and cause heme agglutination, and it is basically attached to the outer lipopolysaccharide coat. It is a rod-like protein. It basically binds to the host integrin, epithelial cells, and macrophages, and causes further manifestations. It basically reduces the immune responses, and it also stimulates cytokine release and interferes with Th1 immune response. Now next is pertactin, which is an outer membrane protein, and then it's the fimbriae or the pili. So these are basically the adhesions of the Bordetella pertussis. Next is the pertussis toxin and the adenylate cyclase toxin. Both of these, eventually what they do is they increase the CAMP levels within the host cells, which causes lymphocytosis, insulinemia, as well as histamine sensitization. One thing to be mentioned over here is pertussis toxin is similar to the cholera toxin. That means it basically has A and B subunit type of mechanism. That means there are binding subunits and there are enzymatic subunits. So what happens is there are 5 binding subunits which bind to the host cell and cause internalization of the toxin, and the A enzymatic subunit, eventually what it causes is it disables the GI subunit within the cell, causing the increase in CAMP levels. So this was the second virulence factor. The third virulence factor is tracheal cytotoxin. As the name only suggests, it is cytotoxic to the trachea. And what is there in trachea? Most commonly it's cilia, right? So basically what it does is it directly damages the cilia within the trachea. The next is dermonecrotic and bacterial endotoxins are also present, which is not of much significance. Now, one thing to be noted over here is the virulence factors are produced by the virulence genes within the bacteria, and these genes are highly susceptible to temperature and ionic changes. So, we discuss about virulence factor. Number 1, adhesions. Number 2, pertussis toxin, adenylate cyclase toxin, and tracheal cytotoxin. Over here, you can see in the picture that what happens is the bacteria comes, it attaches to the ciliated epithelium of the respiratory mucosa, causes cell injury by toxin mediated, and it eventually denudes the mucosa, making the individual highly susceptible to the infection and causing multiple manifestations, as we'll see later. Now, the Bordetella pertussis bacteria, it is spread, the infection basically spreads by airborne droplet nuclei, and it is localized to the tracheobronchial tree. And this entire infection is spread into 3 clinical stages with an incubation period of the earliest incubation period of 7 to 10 days. So the 3 infection stages are catarrhal stage, paroxysmal stage, and convalescent stage. So catarrhal stage is characterized by low grade fevers and coryza. Coryza is nothing but an inflammation of the mucosa, most commonly the respiratory or the nasal mucosa. The catarrhal stage is the most infective stage, and it persists for 1 to 2 weeks. And since it is the most infective stage, in this stage only we'll get smear and culture positivity, which will be eventually seen in the lab diagnosis. And since it's highly infective, this is the stage where spread will be maximum. Next, following the catarrhal stage, there is the paroxysmal stage, in which there is paroxysm of intense cough followed by an inspiratory whoop. Inspiratory whoop is basically rapid inspiration against a closed glottis at the end of expiration, which basically causes a whoop-like sound. That is why it is known as whooping cough. So basically, paroxysmal stage is involving whooping cough as well as post-tussive vomiting. After this whooping cough, the patient could vomit. So that is post-tussive vomiting, and it persists for 1 to 6 weeks. So these paroxysms of intense coughs can be precipitated by noise, eating, or physical contact. The frequency can vary from many per hour to 5 to 10 per day, and it often worsens at night and during the spasm. This is basically intense cough is caused by a spasmodic function. So basically the spasm, during the spasm there would be visible neck distension, bulging of eyes, tongue protrusion as well as cyanosis. And during the paroxysmal stage we can also see weight loss, though fever is not very common. The last stage is the convalescent stage, and it is basically the gradual recovery of chronic cough. The individual is now recovering from the infection, and it is characterized by increase or rise in the antibody titers within the serum, and it persists for 1 to 3 months. Now we have talked about Bordetella, we have talked about the infection it causes. Now it can also cause some complications. What complication it can cause? Since there is violent spasms in coughing, right, so it can cause pressure effects. These pressure effects can cause subconjunctival hemorrhage, hernias or pneumothorax or rib fractures or petechiae. There could be secondary pneumonia, and there could also be neurological complications as the bacteria Bordetella, it can cause encephalopathy, convulsion and coma. Now coming to the laboratory diagnosis, what we can do is, first of all, we have to take the specimen. So what specimen do we take? We take nasopharyngeal secretions. The best secretion which we can take is aspirate, but since it's an invasive procedure, we prefer swabs. So swabs examples are alginate swabs, Dacron swabs or Stewart swab, which is basically charcoal impregnated on cotton swab. Why we do not use cotton swab is basically because there is fatty acid coating in the cotton swab which can actually inhibit the bacterial growth. Ideally, it is suggested that the healthcare worker should take 6 swabs at an interval of 1 to 2 days for the best possible detection. After taking swab, we can do direct smear, which will show us gram-negative Coccobacilli and certain pus cells. Culture is the gold standard for diagnosis, and it is usually done, as we saw, it is done in the catarrhal stage, the first stage. It can be, the bacteria can be cultured in legal low medium or boarded Gengo agar, and it basically produces an appearance of mercury drop-like colonies, as you can see over here, mercury drop-like or bisected pearl colonies. Next, we can also do a smear from the culture we have obtained. So it basically shows small, ovoid, gram-negative Coccobacilli giving a thumbprint appearance. As you can see, there is gram-negative Coccobacilli giving a thumbprint appearance. Next is, we can do biochemical identification by automated methods such as MALDI-TOF and Vitek. We can also detect serum antibodies by enzyme immunoassay. Primarily, we detect IgG antibody over here. We can also do PCR in the initial 4 weeks to detect IS481 and pertussis toxin promoter region genes. And we can also do typing of Bordetella pertussis by doing serotyping and genotyping. Now, we'll come to how do we basically treat this infection. We can treat the infection. The drug of choice or the first line of drug is macrolides. We can prescribe azithromycin for 5 days or erythromycin for 7 to 14 days. But if the child is allergic to macrolides, we can switch over to cotrimoxazole, which is trimethoprim and sulfamethoxazole combination. So we can switch to cotrimoxazole. Now, one thing to note over here is Bordetella pertussis causes lymphocytosis, unlike most acute bacterial infections. Now, talking about a very important thing is the vaccine. So, vaccine are available in 2 forms, a whole cell vaccine and an acellular pertussis toxoid vaccine. The whole cell vaccine is available as Penta or DPT booster. Penta vaccine basically involves DPT plus Haemophilus influenzae plus hepatitis B. So, at 6, 10 and 14 weeks of birth, we first of all give the Penta vaccine. This is according to the universal immunization or the immunization schedule followed in India. So first of all, we administer the child who is at 6, 10 or 14 weeks with Penta, followed by a DPT booster at the age of 1.5 years and 5 years. This whole cell vaccine has certain side effects such as fever, injection site pain, erythema, swelling and irritability. And also, since the bacteria is encephalotogenic, it can cause hypotonic hyporesponsive syndrome. Basically, there is encephalitis with prolonged conversion, and there is hypotonia and the child is less responsive. There are certain contraindications in which we should not administer the whole cell vaccine. That is, if the children is aged more than 5 or 6 years, and if there is any progressive neurological conditions associated, if there is strong family history of epilepsy, or if there is hypersensitivity seen to the previous dose. In that case, we do not administer wholesale vaccine. Now, to counteract these adverse effects, there is the development of acellular pertussis vaccine. This is basically composed of pertussis toxoid along with two or more than two bacterial components such as the hemagglutinin component we talked about, pertactin or fimbre. Its efficacy same as the wholesale vaccine, which is around 85%, but the side effects are fewer, and it can also be seen over here. There was contraindication more than 5 to 6 years we cannot give the wholesale vaccine, but over here we can administer the acellular pertussis vaccine. So most commonly this acellular pertussis vaccine, it is available as Tdap, which is basically tetanus toxoid, diphtheria toxoid and acellular pertussis toxin. Also, a thing to note over here is, now, like in the pre-immunization era, the infants were moreover immunized to the pertussis toxin, were immunized to the bacteria because of maternal IgG antibody, because some or the other way individuals were affected from this organism known as Bordetella pertussis. So the mother's body had developed high titers of IgG, but with immunization what has happened, these titers have significantly lowered and they have gone below the protective range. So infants now no longer have that birth advantage. So basically infant mortality has risen. And the vaccines which we talked about, they do not produce immunization for the entire life. The wholesale vaccine gives you the immunization for maximum of 10 to 12 years, and the acellular pertussis vaccine has even reduced the time frame. It is moreover just 5 to 6 years for which it provides immunization. So now summing up what we have learned about the organism Bordetella pertussis. It is a gram-negative aerobic coccobacilli. We saw about the virulence factors, which include adhesions, pertussin toxin, adenylate cyclase toxin and tracheal cytotoxin. We saw how these act, what is the pathogenesis basically. It is divided into 3 stages: scatteral, paroxysmal and convalescent. We saw the lab diagnosis. We take nasopharyngeal secretions, we can do culture and we can smear the culture, we can do identification, we can do serum antibody detection, which is IgG antibody detection, we can do PCR, and we can do serotyping and genotyping. Next we saw treatment. The first line of treatment or the drug of choice is macrolides, and if the patient is allergic to it, we can use cotrimoxazole. We also saw about certain complications which can take place in the infection. And at the end we summed up by seeing vaccines, which is basically wholesale vaccine and acellular pertussis vaccine. I hope everyone understood.